Hello, everybody, and welcome to Giraffe Time. So giraffes are amazing for a number of reasons, and I'm going to tell you so many of them. So when we think about giraffes, we think of the long-necked creatures in sub-Saharan Africa, and that's exactly what they are. There are, however, 9 subspecies and 4 different species of giraffe. Now, they all look the same from far away, but when you get closer, then the main differences that you see are their spots look quite different. Some will have sort of like snowflake spots, and some will have kind of cow-looking spots. And then also their horns, which we'll talk about, look a little bit different as well. But like all the other times when there's a lot of species and subspecies, I'm just going to talk generally about giraffes. So giraffes are the largest living terrestrial animal in the world, the tallest, and they're the largest ruminant. And so that's actually super interesting because a ruminant is, you probably know, cows or sheep or goats. They are animals that have different compartments, generally 4, in their stomachs. And so what they do is they eat grass, horses as well. Thank you. They eat grass and leaves and vines and things like that. But in order for them to really digest all of it, they have to eat it, regurgitate it up, chew it again as cud. People kind of all heard cud before. They swallow it again, and it kind of comes up again, and they do lots of chewing. This is generally what us as humans, that's what our stomachs do. They break everything down, and we don't have to chew on leaves. Our stomach does all the chewing for us, kind of. So it's pretty interesting to think that after the giraffe swallow their leaves the first time, it travels all the way up that big old neck. Now, how big are giraffes? I'm happy that you asked. Giraffes are really interesting because we've seen them before. We know that they're super tall, but they're actually really, really big. The male giraffe can be about 2,600 pounds, which is about 1,180 kilograms, which is really big, very, very big. It's mostly neck, it's mostly legs. Female giraffes are actually quite a bit smaller. They're around 1,800 pounds, which is about 816 kilograms. So they're still very big, 816 kilograms, very big. But compared to a male giraffe, a little bit different. Now, something that I learned and I was amazed about is all mammals in the world, except for 2, have the same amount of vertebrae in their neck. I knew that giraffes and humans had the same amount of vertebrae, neck bones, but I didn't realize that all mammals did, -2. So there are manatees, they have a different number, and sloths. As you can see from right here, my sloth, he does not have 7 vertebrae in his neck. He's a different number. And I think that's so interesting that just as a rule, all animals, big and small, same neck, different sizes. So each vertebrae, so like our neck bones, you can feel them. They're hefty. They hold their heads up, but they are way different sizes compared to a giraffe. The giraffe vertebrae, each one is about 25 centimeters or 11 inches long. So that's almost the size as long as like a ruler. So that is very, very big. But it does also mean that while they are flexible necks, they're also they're quite strong. They don't really get like sore necks because they have such big, robust vertebrae. Now, the giraffe's neck is too short to actually reach the ground because they also have very tall legs. So when they need to drink, they have to spread their legs apart and kind of like tent themselves down, and they crouch down a little bit. You can see some really cool videos of giraffes drinking on YouTube. So you can see how flexible they have to get. They kind of do like a downward dog position, kind of all squirrely. Now, there's a couple things we don't really know about giraffes. One of them is why they have such a long neck. We think they have a long neck because when you're on in sub-Saharan Africa, on like the savanna and in plain land, the plains land, you can see really far if you have a really big neck, so you can look around for predators. And also, if you have a really long neck, you can eat the tops of trees and you don't have any competition. And so we think that's the reason. We think evolutionarily just it's better for them to eat at the top, but we don't really know. The other thing we don't really know is exactly how they drink. So what researchers used to think was that their necks were just like a big straw and they were kind of like sucking from their body. But it's actually very, very interesting. There was a physicist that studies chaos theory from Hawaii that was doing a sabbatical in South Africa. And he was just walking around looking at animals, as you do. And he saw a giraffe. And so he saw this giraffe drinking and he went, how does that work? And because he is obviously an animal lover, but also someone that's really interested in physics, he saw how big this neck was and went, how can that work? Because they also put their heads down in the water for so long. It's not like they take a drink and then like they swallow and go back like a drinking bird. So he did all this research. He contacted a university in South Africa and said, hey, how did this work? I can't find it on the internet. And the researchers in South Africa were like, oh, we actually don't know, but do you want to do a study about it? And he said, yes, I do. Oh my gosh, there's a dog learning about giraffes. Excellent. So here is the amazing thing that giraffes do. One of the amazing things. So they use their faces like a plunger almost. So if this is a giraffe, hello, I'm a giraffe. They put their mouth down in the water and they use their lower lip to plunge down. And then they, so sort of like a plunger, what happens is you push a plunger down and the water goes down away from the plunger, but then it gets sucked back up. So this is what they're doing with their jaw, their sort of bottom lip there. And if you look at these YouTube videos, like I said before, you'll actually be able to like kind of see this motion. So it's really cool because they're plunging the water down and it's shooting up into their face. Now, how does that work? Because it has to go all the way back through their neck. So unlike us, when we swallow, when we take a drink, it stays in our mouth and then we swallow. They don't really do that. They suck everything and it goes into their neck. And the giraffe pumps the water into their neck, into their whole esophagus, their whole neck, at a speed of about 6.7 miles an hour, which is 11 kilometers an hour. And this is important because if their face is in the water and they have all this neck, they have to pump it really quick so the water doesn't come out their nose again, which no one would want. That doesn't feel nice. So all the water that's already stored in the esophagus is not going to rush back out. So they're drinking and they're pushing all the water back, which is pretty neat. So the giraffe's esophagus, their throat, one full pump of them drinking really fast can hold about 1.3 gallons, which is 6 liters. So that goes like right into their neck. That's how good they are at slurping. So they did a bunch of calculations, and with each pump is about 10 ounces of water. That's one drink, but then their neck can hold 6 liters. That makes more sense. A really long neck, 6 liters of water. So it takes them about 17 pumping cycles to fill up their neck all with water. They drink. And then when they put their head up, that's when all the water from their neck goes into their stomach. That's them actually swallowing. So someone asked how long it takes for a giraffe to swallow, and they actually swallow really quickly because their whole neck is just like water storage. But the process takes about it can take up to a minute of them just like filling up their neck, which is pretty neat. Now giraffes, when they drink, they're normally, because they are prey animals, they normally take a really long time to look around and make sure that they're not vulnerable when they are drinking. Now that's really interesting because around watering holes there are lions, there are crocodiles, there are other things that that want to eat the giraffes. And so giraffes only need to drink sometimes once a day, and sometimes they only drink once every couple days. They get a lot of the moisture that they need from the plants they eat. So they don't have to be vulnerable all the time. They just have like a couple minutes of drinking and then they're good for a couple of days. Giraffes in the wild live to be about 25 years old. They're super social animals. They live in herds of about 15 to 20, which is pretty neat. The male giraffes will generally join bachelor herds, and then when they find a lady that they're interested in, they will join that herd. So it's mostly a lot of females with a few younger males in their herd. It takes about 18 months for the baby giraffes to go out on their own and figure out how to giraffe with their pals. Now, it takes about 15 months for a baby giraffe to be born. So it takes a long time for them to become giraffes. At birth, they drop 1.5 meters from their mom to the ground. But because they've been doing this for a really long time, it means they don't get hurt. They come out of their moms, they get born, they land on the ground, they kind of shake themselves off, and they're good. Now, giraffes are also about 100 kilograms when they're born, and they're about 2 meters tall. Now, they have to be that tall when they're born because they do suckle from their mom. They are mammals and they drink milk. So they have to be able to get to the milk from their mom. Now, like I said, the really tall neck of the giraffe allows them to get the highest plants, and so there's less competition. They love eating acacia trees. These are beautiful trees in sub-Saharan Africa that have very, very delicious, I guess, leaves on them, but they also have really big thorns and spikes on them. So I was really interested in how do they eat such spiky plants? As it turns out, giraffes' tongues are very, very thick, and they have very slimy saliva. And so when they, remember we talked about slugs, snails, and snails are covered in like very thick goo so they don't get hurt. The same with the giraffe's tongue. All of this goo means they can eat all the leaves off an acacia with their prehensile tongue, and they never get any thorns. If a thorn does come off the tree and they swallow it, because their saliva is so gooey, it will cover the thorn and it doesn't hurt their tummies. It's also kind of cool. Now, giraffes' tongues are also purple. We think that is so they don't get sunburned because they do use their tongue to strip the leaves off of the trees. But again, we don't really know. We need another scientist to go, why does that work? Now, someone wanted to know how long the giraffe tongue is. It is between 45 and 50 centimeters long, which is about 17 inches. So they are real, real long. Another really cool thing about the giraffes are their ossicones, which is their horns. Little horns on top of the giraffe are called ossicones. What they are is just a bunch of cartilage that's covered in skin and hair. When the babies are born, the cartilage are actually not fused to, there's a little tiny bit, they don't have those horns. They're not fused to their skull, because if it was fused and they fell in a weird way, they could get broken. So it takes a while for their ossicones to get normal, and normally how we see them. With a number of giraffe species, if you look at a female compared to a male will actually have 3 horns. So they're kind of like unicorns, I think. Females will have 2. And so you can often, I never really realized this until I started looking at pictures of giraffes and like, oh yeah, they do have 3. Huh, interesting. Now you might, so the ossicones exist for a couple of reasons. They, one, they look really cool and you can look at a mate and go, I like your ossicone. I like yours too. Amazing, we should hang out in a herd together. Now, the males will use them for something called necking. And that is when they fight. And you might have seen 2 giraffes fight each other, and that is when they move their neck. It looks really slow, and they kind of hit the other one's neck, and the other one goes, I don't like that, and they hit the other one. When you have such a large neck, this is kind of the, not a defense, but more territorial display that you can do. You can show off to all the other giraffes, look how strong I am. I'm gonna hit you with my head. I'm gonna hit you with my head. They generally, because they are covered in skin and fur, they don't draw blood. It's not like a horn or anything like that. It probably bruises, probably doesn't feel excellent, but it is more of a territorial way to say we're gonna fight kind of a bit slowly, and then one of the giraffes will say, okay, it's fine, I'm gonna get out of here. Now, they also have quite a few blood vessels in them. So we think it's also used for thermoregulation. When it gets really, really hot, a lot of blood can go to that area and it can get cooled down by the wind. But so far, there's lots of wind around there. Now, another really interesting thing that we don't really know about giraffes, but we are learning, is how they communicate. So mothers will occasionally kind of like whistle or like click their tongues at the babies, but then also the other giraffes in the herd. But most of the communication is infrasonically, which means they moan and they grunt, but it is at a frequency that is so low, humans can't hear it, which is super neat. And it's so low that we can like pick it up on some radar that we have, but we don't, because we've only just been studying it, we're not exactly sure how it works and what they're hearing. But what the studies are really interesting because they just are looking at these sound waves coming from the giraffes, and then they look at the other giraffes. And they're like, can you hear that? Is your eye twitching? What are you doing? So it's pretty neat. Now, they also, something that is such a low frequency can travel really, really far, especially we're on the savanna or the plains, which is neat. And so we think they often use that to chat, but then also to warn each other if something isn't that great. Now, mothers will also position their eyes differently, and they'll kind of like squint at the babies to say, hey, what are you doing? And they will use prolonged stares to warn, word I'm looking for, to warn the other members of the herd about danger. So it's kind of like when you get that giraffe stare from your mom. Hey, you're in danger. Stop that. Another really cool thing about giraffes is they are considered pollinators because their face is covered in fur and they spend so much time in these trees that have all these flowers around. The pollen goes on their face and then they go to another tree. And so they're spreading pollen all the way around. So probably the biggest pollinator in the world, from like little tiny bees that does lots of pollination to the face of a giraffe. Something that I didn't love reading because I love naps is giraffes only need about 5 to 30 minutes of sleep in a 24-hour period. What? And they do sleep standing up. So that just makes them seem even more amazing because sleep is so good. So here's a picture of me being kissed by a giraffe. This is in Kenya. I love showing off this picture because it shows how big the face of a giraffe is. And also, I gotta tell you, they are so slimy. Like, I have no doubt that they do not get pierced by acacia thorns because they're so slimy. Normally, giraffes would not want to hang out with you. These giraffes are in a sanctuary in Kenya, and they have been at a very, very young age, they've been at this sanctuary for a long time. So they're very used to hanging out with people. But normally in the wild, they would stay away from you and you'd stay away from them. But if you can get a kiss from a giraffe, why not show it off? So here are some pictures that I also took in Kenya, brag. You can see some little baby giraffes, and you can see them eating from the acacia tree. And then there's one that's just cooling out by that really big cactus. I don't think cooling out is an expression, but let's just use it. Here are a bunch of baby giraffes. Now, the giraffe that, how to explain this giraffe? The giraffe that you can see its profile, the baby, but it's looking at us. It's the right-hand side for me. That giraffe is so young, you can actually see its umbilical cord, which is pretty cool. So you see, even when they are so young, they're pretty new, they're still very giraffe-y. They're still very, very tall. And you can see that they're around their mom quite often. They do need to suckle. They do need to drink milk. But they hang out just on, you can see how great it is to have such a long neck because they can see far. These giraffes are giraffes that I met in Kenya, like I said, near the Rift Valley, and they are called Rothschild giraffe. And we know that it's a Rothschild giraffe because the spots that they have are used for thermoregulation, I should say. The spots cool them down. They look a little bit different from other giraffe friends, but they also have white legs. You can always tell it's a Rothschild giraffe because they have white cotton socks, making it easy. Their feet are as big as dinner plates. They can be 30 centimeters across. They're really big, but fair enough, they're quite big animals. And here's a picture of me next to a giraffe because, again, they look really big, but then when you see them next to you, my face it shows you everything going, whoa, you're very tall, little friend. And then here's just, some more, I think that giraffe might be taking a poo, looking at what its tail is doing. But it's just a beautiful herd of giraffes. They're such social creatures. They love living together and hanging out and communicating. And so it is really important to keep them in the wild, have a lot of habitat for them, and make sure that they stay together as family units. Those are some giraffes for you. Does anyone have any questions?
Why do giraffes have long necks?
Why do they have long necks? We actually don't know why they have long necks. We think it's because the longer their neck, the more tops of the trees they can eat. And if they're the only ones that can eat the top of the trees, it means they don't have to compete with anyone else. And so that's why we think their necks are so big because, competition, a bit hard. Always have all the top leaves.
Why do giraffes have spots?
Yeah, that's a good question. So giraffes have spots. Again, we're not exactly sure. So we just found out that the reason that zebras have stripes is because it tricks flies and they get bitten a whole lot less when they have black and white stripes. We found that out like a month ago. So we're still learning tons about animals, which is cool. Now, the reason they think that giraffes have spots is for thermoregulation, because we're able to look below, do like x-rays and MRIs on giraffes, and we're able to look below their spots and see there's actually quite a lot of blood vessels there. And so on the darker spots, a lot of wind will go through that area, and it's able to cool down their blood, which cools down the rest of the giraffe. So we think it's to make sure that they're cool. If the animal was all white, it would get really, really hot under the sun. So yeah, we think it's very hot in sub-Saharan Africa and has been hot. So it's the way that they kept a bit cooler.
Nora, you may have covered this. How tall are they?
They're about 4.6 to 1.6 meters. So 6 meters in feet is an amount. So it's like 19 feet. So pretty tall.
What is the coldest temperature that giraffes can live in?
That is an excellent question. So because giraffes live sub-Saharan Africa, they live in like Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa. The coldest temperature, the coldest country that they live in is actually South Africa, because that is in the southern hemisphere. So the more south you get, the more close to Antarctica it is, the colder it is. So I bet that's the coldest temperature giraffe would be in South Africa. But when we say cold, a little bit different than what we're used to. They are quite furry, so they can be in places where there is frost, but it would be more important for them to have access to food, so they wouldn't want to be too frosty. But probably around 15 to like 12 degrees would be like the temperatures that they would be okay in, but they would want to be a lot warmer.
And Nora, we also want to know what animals feed on giraffes, or what sort of predators are threatening giraffes.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that giraffes are so nervous when they go to drink water is because when they put their heads down, they're very, very vulnerable. Because think about like how tall a giraffe is. If you were something like a hyena, you would have to, jump all the way up on a giraffe to try to take it down. So small animals like African wild dogs or hyenas don't go after giraffes. Some lions will try. A whole herd of lionesses that do the hunting, they can take down a giraffe. They generally would take down like a sick giraffe, or would try to predate, would eat a baby. But the mom giraffes are very territorial and they're very tough. So they'll use their ossicones, or they'll use their very big hooves, and they try to stomp on the lions or the thing that is going after them or their babies. But crocodiles will sometimes take down a giraffe because the giraffe will look around, and if they don't see the crocodile in the watering hole, they'll put their head down. And crocodiles are such good hunters, they're able to sneak up and they can get the face of a giraffe, which is crazy to think about. That crocodile must be so proud of themselves when it happens.